G'day, welcome to Trooper Cody's Light Horse History channel, and this video is one of our series of horse crime. Every one of these videos has a little twist to it that might make you think, well, how's a horse involved? So see what you think of this one. And I'll start off by saying, if you've ever been to London, you're bound to have been and had a look at Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament. And even if you didn't know it was there when you went to look at Big Ben, directly across the road from Big Ben is a world-famous statue that has been there since 1902, unmoved. It took 30 years for the sculptor to make that intricate statue of a woman and her daughters on a chariot with war horses and blades coming off the chariot wheels. And of course, the woman was Boudica. Boudica. Names are pronounced a bit differently because of 2,000 years passing. But in a nutshell, what happened is, yes, that woman in that chariot did exist. Australia, flies, fair dinkum. Flies are drive us crazy. So, the Romans invaded Britain not that long after the birth of Christ. And so, in 1461, Boudica was the queen of the Innocenti tribe, one of the biggest tribes of Britons that existed before the Romans invaded. Her husband, whose name is totally unpronounceable to me, was alive when the Romans invaded. He was the king, and he was a wise man, and he decided that he wasn't going to fight the Romans, he was going to work with the Romans, which he did. He got on well with them, he traded with them, he paid taxes, paid tributes, and everything was, to use an old English term, hunky-dory. But what happened was that the king died. And when the king died, the queen took over, Boudica. But the Romans weren't that PC. And they were having none of that, of a woman being in charge. So they came and seized all of that deceased king's lands. They gave no recompense or compensation for that, and they were a ruthless race of people, the Romans. And so to prove they meant business, they took the queen, they stripped her in the public square, and they flogged her. Boudica had two daughters, and those two daughters were, there's no way of putting this softly, the two daughters were raped in public, and to make it even more demeaning, they were raped by Roman slaves, not by... Anyway, so that was pretty grim. That happened in around AD 60-61. Now, the Romans probably didn't do a wise thing, because not only did they seize all those lands of one of the biggest chiefs in England, not only did they publicly humiliate his widow and his two daughters, and not only did they seize all his lands, but the Romans they were nothing but crafty, because when they were working peaceably with that king, they were also talking to all the other major landholders, property owners and the rich people, and they were telling them that they would loan them money to expand their fortunes. When that king died, when they struck at Boudica's property, they also called in all the loans instantly. Pay now or seize your property. Most people couldn't pay, so their property was seized. Let's not mention banks. And so this was then ripe for a revolt. But who's going to revolt against highly trained, well-armed, incredibly disciplined Roman legionnaires that have conquered the known world. Well, hell hath no fury like a woman publicly flogged. And Boudica put together an enormous army of Britons, and she then marched on the town of Colchester. This was one of the 3 biggest settlements in the UK at the time. Who lived at Colchester? The Romans had a thing where if you join the army and you work for us and you're a good soldier, when you've done your time, you're going to get a very nice pension. Lots of Roman soldiers had taken their pension and they had decided they liked Colchester area, and so Colchester was mainly populated by retired Roman soldiers. Boudica went there with her army and she slaughtered every man, woman and child in the city. She barricaded up the city and then set fire to it, and it was completely razed to the ground and everyone was killed. As you can imagine, the Romans were very good with communication, and the word quickly spread back to the capital, what was then primarily seen as the capital of the Roman Empire in the Britain. And of course, what was that called? Well, it was called Londinium. And when you think about London, if you know it now, when Boudica was on her rampage, if you want to call it that, London was only 20 years old. It had only been settled for 20 years. What happens is, and I'm going to have to refer to my notes to see if I can pronounce the name, and when I do, this is not a Monty Python Holy Grail sketch, but the governor of Britain at the time was Gaius Suetonius Paulinius. He was the governor, and at the time he was swanning off on the island of Anglesey, and so the troops in charge of London heard what had happened to Colchester, heard the size of Boudica's triumphant army, and they abandoned London. 1 legion of Roman troops stayed there. They were the 9th legion, and they were comprised of Spanish. The Roman army would set up regiments, legions, all Spanish, all French, Gauls, all Germanics. And that way people were with their mates, they worked well together, they all understood each other clearly. So a Spanish legion stayed as a rear guard, and they were slaughtered to the man, and Londinium, was completely razed as well. The Roman governor of the UK has come back from Anglesey. He's rallying his troops. He's somewhere in the Midlands around this time. And if you are English, you might know Nuneaton. Nuneaton's a suburb, I guess, towards Coventry. It's in the Midlands of England. And this was where he was rallying his troops. While he was doing that, Boudica next got to St Albans. It was actually called a different name, and it's not exactly where St Albans is today, and that is because she again killed every man, woman and child, razed the town to the ground. 3 major cities of Britain destroyed in her incredibly successful military campaign against the Romans. And so when they eventually rebuilt St Albans, they've moved it. And the good thing about them doing that is today in England, you can actually go to the old site of St Albans and see the ruins that were destroyed, the town that was destroyed by Boudica. Right at the start of this video, I said about how you can see the statue in London today opposite Big Ben of Boudica in her chariot, with her charging horses pulling her chariot. And you might wonder if that was a bit of mythology or a bit of... But the truth is, She knew she had to be a good communicator with her troops, and what was the best way in those days was to have a chariot that was fast, that could take her quickly around her troops to give morale boosting and orders to them. So it's estimated, there's various estimates, that she had possibly as many as 80,000 Britons with her when she met up with Suetonius, Governor Suetonius. The Romans in those days had 3 names, and it was their middle name was the one that they were primarily called by, and so that's Governor Suetonius. They met in the West Midlands, and when they did, this is when the true Roman brilliance came into effect, because he had his troops all lined up. They had heavy javelins. They were hiding behind their tall shields. And as the Britons en masse approached, huge numbers of them, shoulder to shoulder, cheek to jowl, jam-packed behind each other, the big, heavy Roman javelins were launched into the massed bodies even before they were falling. The second launch of javelins was sent. They again devastated the Britons. Reeling under that shock, the Romans then charged with their short swords. Again, the records at the time, the beauty of this is that so many times there were educated men at these battlefields that made notes of what was happening. And what was happening was that the Romans charged with their short little stabbing swords, and the Britons had their big broadswords, and they couldn't swing them because they were all jammed. And while that was happening, the Roman cavalry surprise attacked and smashed into the rear of the Britons, annihilated them, completely defeated them. What had happened just before that battle? Nero, back in Rome, had said, "This is all too much trouble. Let those bloody Poms have the place. We don't want it. I'm going to pull all the Romans out of Britain." Before that order arrived, of course, the Roman governor smashed the Britons. So this happened, they're not exactly sure, they think 60, 61 AD. Nero at that time was thinking of pulling the Romans out, and you know it did not then happen until around 400 AD. It was another 340 years before the Romans finally pulled out of Britain. What happened to Boudica? The Romans were brilliant at keeping records. If they knew for sure what happened to her, because they caught her, captured her, tortured her, killed her, it would be in those records. Instead, there are 2 conflicting records. One says when she was defeated, she took poison, died, and was secretly buried by her elite troops. And the other one says is that she just got sick, diseased, and died. Either way, there is no official record of Boudica, and what happened to her after that fateful Nuneaton battle. Well, that's a bit of a different story again. A bit different to the Australian light horse. You could wonder, where's the true crime in that? I think you can see there's lots of crime happened throughout that whole story in various ways. I'll leave you to sort that out for yourself. Last thing I'd just like to say is, of course, really appreciate if you subscribe to the channel, and also if you personally share this story. That would really help. Cheers, till next time. Thank you.